How do mermaids reproduce?
Miranda holds onto his hands as they stroll down the bush path. Suddenly, the sky rumbles. Miranda is terrified. Thunder claps as it begins to rain heavily. Bryan attempts to shield Miranda, his lover, when she immediately drops to the ground and turns into a mermaid with a big blue scaly fishtail. Whether this story is real or imagined, there have always existed different and other stories like this which spoke about mermaids. In some stories, they are described in ways that make us admire them, while some drive you into utter dread and fear of them. Like Bryan, would you be consumed in fright and horror seeing Miranda flap her big scaly tail, struggling under the cold outpour? Wouldn't you? In this video, you would be realizing the whole truth about mermaids. Whether they are real or fantasies, it is time you found out. You may wonder how mermaids came to be. Why did so many people around the world imagine them throughout history? It's an interesting question that probably has more than one answer. Throughout time, people have often created stories to help explain all kinds of things they couldn't understand at the time. Stories also help people understand their dreams, desires, and fears. Whatever the reasons, people still clearly love mermaids. You can buy mermaid dolls, coloring books, and costumes. You can find them on flags and coins. At some aquariums and water parks, real people perform as mermaids and have to practice holding their breath and keeping their eyes open underwater for a long time. Even though mermaids are thought to be a myth, they can feed your imagination and creativity. Mermaids are also important because they are a shared idea that has linked people together around the world for a very long time. Mermaids have also been shrouded in mystery, being so alluring, yet ever evading to the public eye. But many people claim to have seen them. Are they like the sailors of the 1800s, tired, sick, and potentially delusional? Or are they lying? A mermaid is a creature living in water that has the upper body of a human and the tail of a fish instead of legs. Mermaids are presented as beautiful women, known for their enchanting songs, but yet the question about their realness persists. We can only guess the answer to this question. Mermaids are seen as mythical creatures, but there is still the prevalent question of where the myth of mermaids originated. Probably, there is truth to the history legend has provided. No evidence of aquatic humanoids has ever been found. Why, then, do they occupy the collective unconscious of nearly all seafaring peoples? It is believed that the sailors of the olden days who reported seeing mermaids were hysterical from months at sea and confused manatees for mermaids. Manatee tails greatly resemble a mermaid tail. They, of course, had gone so long on water without seeing a woman. It is very possible to imagine one. Mermaids appear to be a product of our thoughts or imagination, but you can't completely disregard the fact that they probably might be existing because the majority of the ocean hasn't been combed to confirm. There is a scientific theory that explains that life came to be in the sea and everything developed from there. Then, creatures began to come out of the sea. What if mermaids were the only creatures that never came out but chose to remain in water? Maybe they remained as our transformational ancestors. This is something to think about, as science never confirmed it to happen that way. The belief in mermaids may also have arisen at the very dawn of our species. Magical female figures first appear in cave paintings in the late Paleolithic Stone Age period some 30,000 years ago, when modern humans gained dominion over the land and, presumably, began to sail the seas. Half-human creatures called chimeras also abound in mythology. In addition to mermaids, there were wise centaurs, wild satyrs, and frightful minotaurs, to name but a few. Greek mythology also contains stories of the god Triton, the merman messenger of the sea, and several modern religions including Hinduism and Candomblé, an Afro-Brazilian belief, worship mermaid goddesses to this day. One of the earliest depictions of a mermaid came from Syrian mythology. Atargatis, also known as Derceto, or the Syrian goddess, was half woman, half fish deity of the ancient city Hierapolis, Bambus in Syria. In Sumerian, the oldest language known to man, there are also accounts of part man and part fish demigods, Apkallu. In Mesopotamian mythology, Oarnes is an amphibious being who taught mankind wisdom and was described having the form of a fish with the head and feet of a man under his fish's head and tail. The reality of mermaids was also assumed during medieval times when they were depicted matter-of-factly alongside known aquatic animals such as whales. Hundreds of years ago, sailors and residents in coastal towns around the world told of encountering the sea maidens. One story dating back to the 1600s claimed that a mermaid had entered Holland through a dike and was injured in the process. She was taken to a nearby lake and soon nursed back to health. She eventually became a productive citizen, learning to speak Dutch, perform household chores, and eventually converted to Catholicism. It is indeed mysterious. What then happens to all the beautiful tales of mermaids you grew up hearing? Do you discard them as merely lies or infatuation? For centuries, mermaids have captured the imagination of both sailors and landlubbers, fascinated by the idea of hidden fish people beneath the waves. Yet the exact nature of these underwater humans has varied pretty wildly over the years. Even though the fantastical beings are thought to be fiction, there are still places all over the world where you can visit actual mermaids in some form or another. Whether they are Barnum-esque hokum, frolicking manatees that inspired the myth in the first place, or even some South Korean fisherwomen that have come to be known as mermaids. All across the world, mermaids are real. Mermaids live in the sea and stay in marine areas all around the world, according to the history legend provides. It perhaps would be rather agreeable to see mermaids as spiritual beings, or gods who are metaphysical and invisible and can be prayed to and communicated with. Mermaids are reported to also live in Atlantis. The lost city of Atlantis is still an ongoing search for truth of an island that sunk and is now submerged. In some stories and movies, mermaids live there. You would almost argue that mermaids are very kind and loving creatures, following the pictures we have had of them in stories and movies. But are they harmless? Mermaids have been depicted as dangerous in certain films and stories, but they are often known to rescue sailors. It just depends on the work of fiction they are in. Generally, it is sirens that are considered to be dangerous. Sirens are predators. Sirens are the villains, the ones who lure sailors to their deaths. The ones who you picture with spikes, sharp teeth, webbed hands, and fierce eyes. However, like Miranda, Bryan's lover, mermaids are beautiful, charming creatures who sit on the beach chanting melodious songs. One could only imagine they communicate with some sort of echolocation and vibrational sounds. Very often, they are seen saving a drowning sailor and helping him to the shores. And when they fall in love with humans, they change into humans themselves. There are likely to be a few bad ones. Mermaids can feel emotions and can probably make judgments. This means there could be mermaids who choose to do bad things. You would ask next if mermaids eat. Well, all living things feed. It depends on the mermaid. You would simply think mermaids love seafood, like fish, clams, and crabs. But some mermaids see fish are friends and not food. Vegetarian or herbivore mermaids eat plants like seaweed. In 1403, a mermaid was found stranded in the mud after a storm in West Friesland. She was then taken, clothed, and given ordinary food. Some say she lived for 15 years in capture, trying to escape constantly. She was also taught to kneel before the crucifix and spin, but she was never able to speak. How do mermaids reproduce? Possessing the lower anatomy of a fish, mermaids may reproduce exactly like fish. Fish, and therefore mermaids, do not possess external parts. Fish reproduce in so many ways depending on the species. Fish have similar reproductive organs as humans, except they are not external. The female lay eggs and they will be scattered about in the water where the male goes to fertilize them. But some fish make a form of intercourse or a mating ritual. There are also types of fish that can fertilize themselves. The best hypothesis for mermaid reproduction is that they mate in the same fashion. You can imagine mermaids likely having some sort of intimacy in a more human-like process. Mermaids are also known to be polyamorous. In other words, polyamory is the practice of or desire for intimate relationships with more than one partner, with the informed consent of all partners involved. It has been described as consensual, ethical, and responsible non-monogamy. Another reasonable alternative would be that mermaids are mammals and reproduce like dolphins. They would keep their baby in their belly until it is ready to be born. For the birth, the scales of their lower abdomen stretch in a vertical line to let the baby pass. Well, whether or not mermaids exist, you love the concept of them. What could be more beautiful and magical? It would be interesting to one day discover mermaids do in fact exist. But for now, we'll just use our imaginations, all the while pretending to see them as one. Oh, for Bryan, what do you think he did after seeing Miranda in that state?